Ladies and gentlemen, Psychedelic Science 2025. I was walking about, and who do I see but one of the coolest people that I've met virtually but never in person? The one and only Keith Heinzerling. Keith, what's going on, man?
Not much, George. I was very glad to be able to meet you in person. I feel like we already know each other, but it's great to meet in person as well.
Yeah, we were just talking briefly about, LinkedIn being a place where you can meet so many cool people virtually. But psychedelic science has really been a place where I've got to come and actually meet the
Mhm.
people that I've spoken to for so long. It's amazing. I've seen Susan Gooner out here, Christian, Diego, Jack Gorselin, Noah, Alex Detmering. Like so many people are out here just doing their thing. It's a beautiful arena.
Agreed.
So Keith, when I came out here, I was a little bit overwhelmed, and I decided to ditch my whole, you know, plans that I have and just sort of kind of go out and start looking at talks and listening to people. What have you thought about the whole convention so far? It's already Friday.
Yeah, it's been flying by. I too have just pretty much been wandering around. I've tried to go to a couple talks and been intercepted on the way by people like yourself, George, who I want to see and then end up talking and miss the talk or show up at the end and try to grab the speakers.
Right.
So it's been a very fluid couple days, but it's been very productive, and I feel very grateful to have been here and be able to meet everybody.
Yeah, me too. There's so many people here with so many different points of view. I kind of feel for a long time science and spirituality have been at odds a little bit, but there's everybody here and everybody's talking about it, figuring some things out. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I had been thinking that maybe psychedelic science isn't exactly the right name for
Yeah.
it in a way that maybe it should be psychedelic science and spirituality or just something a little broader. There's plenty of good science being presented
Yep.
and like you, George, I feel like our mission is to in this modern time is to not lose the essence and the benefits of scientific thinking and use technology for good, but at the same time, not over rely on it and allow the other non-physical aspects of life to come back to be side by side and at the table with science instead of it's not an either
Right.
or. It's
Right.
not an either or.
It's interesting you say that because first off, it's beautiful, and second off, it echoes like all the work you're doing. For our audience out here who may not know, maybe you could shed a little light on what it is you're doing.
Sure. Yes, I'm a physician. I'm a doctor, and I run a psychedelic research center in Santa Monica, and we do clinical trials of psychedelic medications for mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. It is primarily working with pharmaceutical companies who are trying to get FDA approval of the medicines. And I feel strongly that getting FDA approval of, say, psilocybin or
Yeah.
any of the psychedelic medicines would be a very important thing to provide access to psychedelic therapy for patients. But it is only a small sliver of what is interesting and important in the realm of psychedelics. The medical applications of psychedelics, I want to see the benefits realized for patients and for society,
Yeah.
but there and I think in some of the developed countries the path through medical testing and medical approval of psychedelics is seen as a way to get started, and it's something that most people I think probably find acceptable, but the potential benefits of psychedelics go well beyond the medical applications, and I really am very excited to try to lend my efforts to increasing access to psychedelics in that realm as well.
Yeah. I think you are lending an incredible hand to it. Like you and your whole team are doing amazing work
Thank
down
you.
there.
Thank you.
On the way in earlier today, I was talking with a friend of ours, Matt Zeman, and he was telling me about some ceremonies at end of life ceremonies.
Hmm.
They had recently had a gentleman that was like 86 years old, and he came in with his family to share like the last, time of his life together.
Yeah.
Like that to me, like I get goosebumps when I think about it.
Yeah.
If we can start seeing the end of life or these traumatic moments, he had mentioned someone that had cancer,
Yeah.
stage 4, and she wanted to come in with her family and have a ceremony and celebrate life as a process.
Yeah.
Like I think we're moving in that direction. What are your thoughts on? Can we get there? Can we get more people to see that?
Well, my my thoughts about can we get there are mostly revolve around a greater sense that I have just personally where I'm at in life. That, there's there's a lot of stuff. Most things are probably out of my control. I just am, they're all just here.
Right,
And
right.
there's the arc of the history of humanity that is just slowly unfolding. And sometimes if depending on if you zoom in on certain times or pull back, right? Like if you look at where psychedelics are today or this month
Right.
versus overall. And also like George, you and I were just talking before we went on air about how if you pull back and also think about psychedelics in their proper, I think proper
Okay.
context, which is that a lot of the things that are happening with psychedelics are happening in related ways in the world, in society, in culture in general. It's really it's not like this is happening in isolation. This is a time, one of those times I think in history where things are gonna do some sort of a phase shift. And I sincerely hope that whatever is shifting doesn't end up, that those can be difficult times for
Yeah.
people. Many innocent people go through suffering or may be harmed. I really hope that can be minimized. But it does feel like a time where things are speeding up. Like
Yeah.
myself and my colleagues were saying, wow, it feels like things are speeding up, but we feel much more grounded and confident in our mission. So we're slowing down in a way and just being like, well, we know why we're here. We know what we're supposed to be doing. We're doing it as best we can, and everything else is accelerating around us. So it's a strange time, and with all risks, there's opportunities, and
Yep.
hoping that the risks won't be too bad and the opportunities will turn to be good for everyone.
It's so well said. With AI and psychedelics, especially like the bubble you and I travel in,
Mhm.
it seems that it's just so fast and so quick, and things are always changing.
Yeah.
But I see so much positive traction out there. You have
Yeah.
Texas that kind of just passed the
Yeah.
ibogaine. Although, you know what I heard? I heard that the Texas that they legalized ibogaine, or I'm sorry, they didn't legalize ibogaine. They got a large funding for ibogaine.
To do research.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm.
But I heard they also took away THC products. So did you hear about that?
Oh, I Oh, there was some, but a
It was a
separate piece.
separate,
I think it
yeah,
was a separate piece
a
of
separate piece.
legislation. Yeah. I mean, that's how it's. I mean, I live in
Okay,
California,
me too.
and we're right. We're I have a lot of friends and colleagues, and I try to help always. I say, if I can help in any way, they're trying to work on policy
Okay,
related to
nice.
psychedelics in California. And I've been reluctantly involved in political and policy things in the past. I say reluctantly just because it's such hard work.
Of course,
I have such respect for like the people that are trying to
right?
work on policy. You talk about needing a long view, you really do. But like currently in California, if you do surveys of people, there's a pretty good support for the idea that psychedelics could be helpful to society. But when
Yeah,
you think about trying to actually get a law passed in California or any state,
right,
whether it's state, local, federal, there are so many random things that are kind of about, politics is people.
right,
Politics is people. And so it's people, and people have feelings and ideas that differ. And that's a beautiful thing. But it's not like rational always. It's not like, well, here are all the good pros and cons. And then we're a computer and we say, well, the pros are more than the cons.
right,
So it passes. There's a lot of like very complex things that come into play that don't have anything to do with psychedelics. So
yeah,
so yeah, I think that just shows that it's not like there isn't necessarily some grand understanding behind some of these things. It's just that the way politics works is you got to get lucky, and maybe someone who's influential has a personal,
Yeah.
experience that leads them to be supportive, and they're able to guide it through. And
Yeah.
so, it's a crazy thing. And Texas is ahead of California at the moment,
Yep.
which is really strange because you would think California, you'd think it would be the opposite. So who go figure? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting to see and think about the different states. Something here in Denver, like I was outside the conference and they had a people with a booth. They're selling like mushroom gummies and
Yeah.
like people are
What
lighting
do you
up
think about
cannabis on
that?
the street. I think it's a double-edged sword. Like I love the fact that it's decriminalized. I
Yeah.
think that's really awesome. But I think on some level it opens the door to getting products that are
Yeah.
less than.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And maybe that's part of it though. I don't think maybe you can't maybe the people that are going to find these products need to start doing some research and figuring out who's reputable,
Yeah.
who's not. And maybe the idea, and maybe this is a bigger part of the policy, is this idea that we can be safe all the time is sort of flawed. I understand that we need to be safe, like, and I'm for harm reduction and I'm for safety. But it seems that you're never going to be safe. And there's going to be people out there that are purely for profit or trying to do some things out there. So I see both sides of it.
Yeah.
What are your
And
thoughts?
there's just in general, it's very hard to simplify.
Yep.
In the adult modern world, there aren't many clear black and whites.
So true.
There's so much gray. So when you're trying to craft a policy, I'm sure I see what they're trying to do.
Right.
Try to create an environment that encourages the responsible things and
Right.
discourages, but you can never eradicate some action or behavior. It's just probably not possible. But one thing I was thinking yesterday and today, which I was saying to a couple people this morning, because people were saying, well, what's the biggest impression you've had so far of the conference? And for me, I think it's that I sense a huge energy around and under ibogaine at the
Yeah.
moment,
Yep.
and it's a it's a very interesting energy in that there is quite a bit of interest in the science, and could it be a treatment, a medicine for treatment in the medical system, and
Yeah.
how would you deal with the potential cardiac complications that
Right.
may come along, and et cetera, et cetera. And then at the same time, I just feel this really strong, and this is true for all of the traditional psychedelics, of
Okay.
course, but there's feels like there's something particularly unique. It's similar, kind of like with ayahuasca. There's a
Right.
very specific. I feel a sense of just a huge, specific type of history behind ayahuasca, and I feel the same thing with ibogaine. And I feel those forces of the indigenous
Yeah.
aspects of ibogaine. It feels like they're holding their ground, and they're really trying to stand up a bit now and more, and try to come to the table, and counter some of the commercialization plans. And it's that seems, I mean, that I want to support that. I It's not even that I want to support that, it just feels right and natural.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also know that the train has left the station, commercialization of psychedelics. And again, I don't know that it's going to be possible to, or even beneficial to
Right.
try to prevent, right? So, but it almost feels like there's been this like debate and dance of like the pharmaceutical companies and the indigenous
Right.
people, and there have been two sides, and both have been kind of progressing, but they haven't come together to actually like hash it out, or God forbid fight it out.
Yeah.
Not yet. And it almost feels like maybe this ibogaine is going to be the place where there's more of a direct engagement. And I really hope that that could lead to something, a better, in general, for psychedelics, a
Yeah.
better balance, and a cooperation and a coalition between the the variety of different stakeholders to try to come up with something that will just be good for all involved, and in particular, really like ingrains a respect for where the medicines have come from, while at the same time is open to modern science, perhaps, taking some of the knowledge and advancing it hand in hand, maybe with, but I don't know, it may not play out, and it may turn out to be just a big fight. I hope not. And so, but it's, I don't know, that feels like an energy there.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful point. And one of the reasons I think psychedelics has had a problem is it's difficult to measure subjective things. And so when we try to get into the labs and we try to figure out, okay, yes, but why? It's very difficult
Yeah.
to figure that out. But Iboga comes in as like, I
Yeah.
work, and they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, but why? Don't worry, I work.
Yeah,
Watch
no,
this,
I know.
and it's so undeniable,
There is something about, I agree
right?
with you. There's some, and not even like at that level, but you're touching on an aspect of what I feel about it. It's just like I bogus, like, the history of it is like it's a proud, it feels like there's
It
it's
does.
noble. It
It
feels
does.
pretty noble. Like
Yep.
like we are here, we've been here, and you know mess with us at your risk. Not
Right.
like threatening, not aggressive in any. I don't feel aggression, but I do feel like, hey,
Respect.
if yeah, we deserve respect, and we're gonna try to we're ready to defend ourselves
Yeah.
if necessary. We're proud. It's a proud thing, and so and I respect that. But yeah, you're right, and so it's yeah, I mean, subjective is subjective. Like,
Right.
you can't take objective measures and try to assess subjective. It's kind of silly to try, but the biggest thing for me, that like underlying all, like we were talking about, like
Right.
what like Instagram saying you can't talk about
Right.
psychedelics, and what
Right.
LinkedIn, can you talk, are they going to say you can't talk about psychedelics? And we were saying that we could have a very productive conversation and never use the word psychedelics and talk about exactly what we want to talk about, because psychedelics are an amazing case study, one of the best there is, of course, but nonetheless, it's not about psychedelics as much as that psychedelics open the door to a variety of things that are what I'm really interested in, what I really think can help the world. And that is a better balance of, you know, the objective measurements and scientific worldview is one slice
Right.
of what we live in, and there are limits to what it can explain and what we can use those tools for. And to say that the things that we can't explain currently with science are not important or don't exist or are in our imagination is harmful and not helpful, and really just doesn't make any sense to someone who lives and has experiences, and the experiential part is very valid. So a wider, more holistic view of reality that isn't just firmly rooted, entirely limited to the materialistic, is what interests me the most. And psychedelics are a way that it like it demonstrates it, or
Yeah.
gives you the experience that can open you to that. Some people are aware without psychedelics, but psychedelics are a good tool for that. And I think that's what it's not. I was gonna say, sometimes people are, well, can psychedelics save the world? I was thinking, nothing's gonna save the world, or not. I mean, it just doesn't. No one's
Right.
coming to save us.
No one.
There's no. It's us. We're gonna do it or we're gonna not, and it's not so binary anyway. And even if humans disappear, it's just gonna keep on going without us. Sadly, or maybe that's what has to happen. I have no idea. I hope not. But yeah, we don't need we don't need to. We can talk about the important things, even if someone told us you can't say them in psychedelics.
Right.
It's all still there.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting to think about the authoritarian part of it. And maybe that's something that happens. Maybe, when we look at addiction,
Hmm.
like it is a pretty big they're like a $32 billion industry,
Mhm.
you know, and there are a lot of entrenched people, and there's a lot of livelihoods, and there's institutions built around it. Do you think that there is, like, is there, I hope there's not a fight, but on some level, maybe there can be a coming together of the two. Like, can
Yeah.
they find a path to work together instead of it having to be like, we're not doing this? That's
We have to, I mean, the only way we can make any progress is working together.
right.
I'm very, yeah, I think often these days about how some of the biggest challenges I think we're facing, they're all planetary level challenges.
Yeah.
They're not
Good
national
point.
challenges. They're not something, you know, the nations serve a purpose. I don't necessarily think we should have no nations. I think there's nothing wrong with being patriotic. It's actually
Right.
healthy. Patriotism, having a strong sense of like a heritage and a culture at in a
Yeah.
place, but it's not the most important thing. And nationalism has never really been a good thing. As it usually just leads to conflict. But we need more of an understanding that we're all in this together, and to work at the most core levels. All those are deep core
Right.
issues that are common to the planet, not even just humans. And so psychedelics and like addiction, which is my specialty, was my main medical specialty. We often talk about how, like, listen, if someone is out of control drinking and they're driving drunk and they're losing their job, right? You need to focus on the drinking behavior to stabilize things, right? Because
Right.
they may die or something. It's all about focusing on the substance at the start.
Right.
But that's just the substance use is just a symptom. That is what the tip of the iceberg above the water. You see that. The real issue is all below, whatever it is, and it's different for every person.
Right.
Sometimes it's a traumatic thing or whatever it is. I think there is much more understanding in the modern addiction therapy world at the moment that, yes, it is important. It used to be just entirely focused on you need to not use the abstinence
Yeah.
from the substance.
Yeah.
That's all that mattered, right? No, so they have much more of an understanding of that, but there still are some places where there's some limitations in the conceptualization but it is getting better.
Yep.
Because I remember way back when, just first starting with addiction medicine, and after you talk to enough people, you realize that from when you first look at their life, you're like, it's chaos, and they're doing all these drugs that are harming them. Why would they do that? It's
Right.
so irrational. What are they, crazy? But then you get the greater context of their life and their situation, and unfortunately for them, where they're at the moment, the most rational thing to do is use the substance because
Right.
they're holding their entire life together with this, like, duct tape of the drug or alcohol. And if they pull that off without proper support, everything falls apart. So
Right.
they're in a bind where they're like, actually, the most logic. If I realize, like, if I was in their circumstances, I would probably do the drug too.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean it's not an excuse, or it doesn't absolve anyone of individual responsibility to try to be a good person and to try to work to be better. But you have to take that context, because if you just try to get them to remove the crutch, which it is a crutch,
Right.
right? You
Right.
throw the crutch away without something else to support them, they're not gonna
Some
swim.
fall.
They're gonna
Right.
sink. So, and psychedelics are perfect for that. It's a great example of how it
Yep.
really just pushes through, like, it pushes through the surface level things to the lower things. And that's why I think there's so much, amazing potential for working with addiction and substance use disorders with psychedelics.
Man, it's such a great answer. It blows my mind too to think that for a long time, and maybe with good intentions, we really worked on solving the symptoms. Like, hey, this is the symptom right
Yeah,
here. But with a newfound awareness, it seems that you can get to the underlying problems, and like that is where real work is being
yeah,
done. Especially, if we go back to iboga for a moment, they're having incredible rates of helping people, like 88% once they begin a process with iboga, and
yeah,
relatively short. Obviously, it's not a magic bullet, and it's not going to be one session, but there's over a period of time you can use it.
yeah,
And in some of the testimonies I get from people are like, I figured out why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
and I don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
amazing to
Oh
think
yeah.
that they're changing the
Yeah.
whole
We've
neuroplasticity and
had
figuring it
so
out.
many people do the clinical trials with psychedelics, and at the end of all of it, they'll say, I'm so glad I did this. It helps so much, and I hope to never do this again. Yeah, again, they're like, it is a lot,
Right,
so
right,
yeah, and I think sometimes are clearly important,
of
but
course.
you're totally right. Like treatments that just ameliorate, so I work in behavioral health and mental health, but I'm also just a regular general medical doctor by my primary training. So like if you're a medical doctor and there's a fever, you
Yep.
go, yeah, here's some Tylenol, maybe make you feel a little better. But you really, what the doctor's thinking is, what's causing the fever? What's the source of the fever?
Right,
Is it something that's going to kill them, or is it mild? Do we do you would prefer to treat the cause of the fever
right,
so the fever goes away? Yeah, you give them something to feel better till the
right,
underlying thing gets addressed and identified. But so like just making people feel less sad when they have depression, right? It would be much better to get to the cause.
right. I, I think for me anyway, and I can only speak through my own lens, but my relationship with psychedelics has really broadened my awareness of my relationship to the world.
Yeah,
And I think that that's a big part of behavior
yeah,
and mental illness, or I don't even know if I like mental illness. Like,
yeah,
maybe there's a better word
yeah.
or something along
We
those lines.
always, it's like when I see patients for the first time, I usually ask them, you know, do you consider yourself an addict or an alcoholic?
That's a good
And
question.
just to see what they say. And I always say, I'm not going to ask you a lot of trick questions, but this is one of them where I'm asking it for a reason, which is that I don't really use those terms with patients. We
Right,
say alcohol use disorder
right.
or substance use disorder, but it is important. Some patients will say, yeah, I'm an addict, I know. And then other patients are like, I'm not comfortable with that term. Words are powerful,
Yes.
they are important, but you don't need to, but they're just words. You don't need to like hold on to it if it's not productive or helping the person. Switch up the words, call it whatever you want to call it. I
Yeah.
don't care. What I care about is what you actually do and what we actually do, not what we call it. But I'd like to agree on what we could call it so that so you're not in the back of your head
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to do what this guy says because he called me that name. And I'm like, I'm not going to
Right.
call you a name. We got to get come to an agreement on the terminology. So
It's a brilliant
but
point.
yes, psychedelics, again, this isn't specific to psychedelics. Psychedelics just happen to be, very uniquely suited for
Right.
this. But that is, I think, the task in life in general is just kind of understanding who you are and why you're here and how you're supposed to, make a difference. And for some people, that difference is on a big stage, and in others, it's on, quote unquote, a smaller stage. But a lot of times, probably those small things are really what make it the most difference in the long run. Just
Yep.
being a good parent or member of your family or community or whatever, and knowing yourself and better understanding where you're, like you said, your place in the grander, the fabric of life and humanity and the world. And that's just a general task that we're all supposed to do each time around. And psychedelics can be very helpful for that, right, if you do it the right way.
And I love so much of that. Like you're if I come back to words for a minute,
Hmm.
like the idea when we label people,
Hmm.
sometimes that becomes an identity for them.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're an addict, you're a abuser, you have PTSD.
Yeah. Well, we all do. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right,
I let
right,
them label themselves.
right,
I don't
right,
want to label them.
right,
But if they have like a label that they're using to express, a code word for their identity, that's
r-
important to know. And so, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. I don't want to label them,
right.
mislabel.
What if do you think we could get to a place where instead of like PTSD, we got to like PTGO, like post traumatic growth opportunity.
Yeah.
Like a rite of passage. Like
Yeah.
if we saw it, if those people could see themselves as a rite of passage, like
Yeah.
look, you're bleeding, you're crawling, you've
Yeah.
lost everything, but congratulations, you
Yeah.
made it.
I know.
Now you're one of us,
It, yes, I think about this a lot.
Okay,
And this
cool.
is an example, I think, of, again, like whether you want to, when you look at a life you can either zoom in or zoom back, and which is most important? Well, you know, okay, right now, if you were like standing on my toe, George, I'd
Right.
be like, George, come on, that's not George, right? Like that's pretty important. It's just in the moment, but
Right.
hey, I don't want, I don't want my toes stood on. But like if I zoomed back to my entire life, this one moment of
Right.
someone standing, is it really that important, right? Is it defining? No. So, um, yes, right. Like the truth of the matter is that uh, these things happen for a reason in a way. I
Right.
don't think that there's like, a guy with a beard and up there just like planning it out for us, like the principal of school or anything, but they do for, happen for some reason, or at the very least, if we're lucky, we can make things meaningful, make things good or bad that happen to us meaningful.
Right.
They are growth opportunities. It is a little hard to say that to people when they're in the thick of it, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
when they're in the thick of it, they don't want to hear that, and so you have to be a little bit, gentle with how you bring that up. But that is absolutely true, right? If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, I guess, is one way to think about it.
Yeah.
And so many good things emerge from, like, I often think, like, I have some patients who have alcoholism who are
Okay.
really far into recovery, as they call it now, and even like in Alcoholics Anonymous, sometimes people will ask me, or I'll ask people, what do you know about AA? And then look at the 12 steps, and the first three steps of AA about, like, powerless and needing some, higher power. Those are the first three ones that are really like about the addiction, and then the rest of them are kind of things that you might, just like the Boy Scouts might have, or something, that are just like kind of nice thing. Make amends to people you've harmed, or be of service, right? Like, they're actually just things that are nice things that good people probably would agree would be good to do,
Yeah.
right? And so I've had so many people who will say, when I look back, I mean, I really wish I didn't have to go through all that. It wasn't fun. I feel bad that I hurt people, but it's, in a way, it's a gift, because I may not, and I'll say to them, like, I don't have a drug or alcohol problem. Why? I have no idea. I'm not better than anyone
Right.
else, but maybe I've missed opportunities for growth, right? But I'm
Totally.
just kind of cruising through life, and I'm getting by, and no one's telling me I need to, like, examine myself deeply and change. So I go, oh, all right, I'll just keep trucking. But for them, it hits the fan. And if they get through it, then they look back and they're like, there's a lot of things about me that I might not have never gotten to, that are wonderful things now, that only happened because I
Right.
went through that. And but you got to convince them that you just got to hang in there long enough so that when you zoom back, you're like, wow, look, it's a hard one, and particularly when they're suffering in the moment.
Man, it's so brilliantly put. When I look back on some of the tragedies in my life, like I wouldn't, first off, I would have, if I could choose, I would have never chose to do them, and I wouldn't choose anybody else to do them.
Yeah.
But that being said, it was those tragedies that allowed me to be who I am.
Mhm.
And I think when you get to a spot where you can look back and make sense of it, after the
Yeah.
emotion is sort of wavered,
Yeah.
like you really realize, oh my gosh, that was a transformational
Yeah.
moment in my
Of
life. And
course. Yeah.
because of that, I'm going to love more than I ever have
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
opportunities are there.
Yeah. The hardest ones, I think, are when, like when you have hurt people
Yeah.
in those bad
Yeah.
times, when, so like people who cause an accident driving intoxicated, and they have to live with that
Right.
forever, and that's a tough one. Or when you've been hurt by other people, right? Like a lot, like I was thinking about how, people you can have a tsunami or an earthquake or a natural disaster, and people are hurt and harmed, and it's terrifying. And people certainly can have PTSD even as a result of
Right.
those events. But then terrorism and war, or individual violence between people,
Yeah.
just is so much more damaging, because it's like, someone did that,
Yes.
and another person, and particularly when it's someone close to
And
you,
your
that is
family,
the
watch
most,
out.
yeah, that's the deepest wound, and there's just a whole nother layer. So, you know, there'll never be a world without challenges and adversity, and there'll be, you know, disasters or famines, but violence, by humans, I really feel like hopefully we could outgrow that someday. It's really
Yeah.
not, I don't know, it's not.
Do you think it's getting better though? Like when I like let's take for
I
example
hope
like
so.
family abuse. Like,
Yeah.
you know, when you look back not that long ago, it seems to me that perhaps it used to be everybody would spank their kids or
Yeah.
you'd get the belt or something like that, but it seems a lot less, and not only that kind of abuse but like sexual abuse or
Yeah.
trauma. Like I think it's getting better. I think we're spiraling upwards, so it
Yeah.
seems like it repeats, but maybe it spirals up and we're getting better at it. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
I think that one of the what I've heard from people who have had experiences like this, they will say that another aspect of it that's harmful and really hurtful is um, that there is that they'll be embarrassed about it
Yeah,
having happened, that there's a stigma,
it's
and they're the
shameful.
victim, right? Like, how could you be embarrassed? You didn't do anything for that to happen to you. It happened to you. It's not how. Why would you be embarrassed,
You
right?
know why I think they
But it
would be?
is.
I think they would be because it brings shame on their family.
Yeah, yeah, of
And
course.
you're gonna break it.
Yeah.
Oh, if you say this, you're gonna hurt
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
And
So I do think that that there are some advances. There's more openness to talk about things publicly
right?
more, because the truth of the matter is everybody thinks that something isn't going to happen to them or doesn't happen to anyone they know. It's a distant thing that you can just put out of your mind, but that's not true, right?
Yeah.
When people do open up, you realize that everyone knows someone who's had one
Yeah.
of these things happen, and they're like a real person, who you know and love. And so I do think that that's definitely getting better. There's still problems, and that is an important one, because the only way to make advances in general would be to be able to be in productive dialogue with about an issue. So hopefully that's getting better, at least as a first step.
Yeah, I think so. And I think psychedelics are playing a huge part in people being comfortable talking about things that have happened, they realizing that the things that happen to a lot of people. And psychedelics just makes you more aware
Hmm.
of things going around in the world right now.
Hmm.
So that's one of the I think, who I've been talking to a lot is like therapists that are using psychedelics, and they tell me about how talk therapy, it used to work,
Hmm.
but when they use talk therapy in conjunction with psychedelics, it seems to have profound effects.
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day. I think there's two things. I don't have any scientific
Okay.
proof of this. I don't know how to prove it
All
scientifically,
right.
but two impressions that I have from psychedelic therapy are, number one, and we saw this, and we did a study of psilocybin in alcohol use disorder. So we witnessed this, I believe. When you tell, like, I could be a doctor, I have a certain authority as a doctor. I can tell someone,
Right.
you should stop drinking. You need to see, I'd recommend you stop drinking. Um, and I have to say that a lot because it's a responsible thing to say to people. But the initial, anyone, me too, right? If you told me to do something, my initial reaction is like, who are you? You push back. That's just
Yeah.
kind of a natural
Yeah, of
human
course.
reaction, right? So when we did the alcohol trial, we did not mandate that people set a goal of abstinence from alcohol. We didn't tell them what their goal should be. We said we want you to be safer, to point out that some of these behaviors are dangerous, not healthy. But we want this to be a way for you to explore and examine and potentially come to a more healthy relationship with alcohol. You and alcohol, your relationship, maybe what parts do you want to change about that to be more healthy and safe? And um, despite the fact that we were so open about it, quite a few of the patients went through the psilocybin session, and they came out and they were like, I gotta quit drinking. But it came from them.
Yeah.
It came from
Yeah.
within. It was there the whole time. It's down deep in
Right.
there, but they're afraid of it for a variety of ways because they're using alcohol to cope. And they're like, if I give it up, how will I cope? Right.
Yep.
But down deep, they know that they should quit drinking. They know all the bad things, but they have this massive layer of like protection and denial set up. And if you start to attack it from the top, it's going to be a long battle to get down to that
Right.
thing, and they're going to fight you to the death about
Yeah.
it. So, but with the psychedelic therapy, it was them. The part of them stepped to the front and said, "We need to quit drinking," and so that's so much more empowering. And then the second
Yeah.
thing that I feel like there's some element of is that just doing psychedelic therapy, or just taking the plunge and like the leap of faith, and and it's a challenge, and sometimes it's a challenging experience, the ordeal of it, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
rites of passage.
Yep.
If they drop you off in the desert and you either make it back and you're like a grown person, or you don't make it,
Right.
that's it, right? So, just sometimes I feel like it's less. Sometimes people do get insights and they're like, wow, it's blank. I've never put the dots together.
Right.
This is the secret to the universe, and now I can live healthily. But sometimes I feel like the content isn't as important. Like a bunch of random things could emerge, and it's less important that those are the things than that you went through, right? It's the rite of passage, it's the
Yep.
hero's journey, it's just a archetypical, legend, mythological thing that we all have to go through in some way in our life, one way or the other. And that's what you're providing them, and that you're giving them the quest, and they need to make it through the quest to get to the other side, and then they can be strong. Then they
Yeah.
realize, hey, I'm strong enough to do it. I can do it. Whatever it is, I can do it. I can do life. So I don't know how to study that per se. Even whether it's worthwhile studying, maybe just leave it be what it is, and not everything needs to be in a research paper.
Yeah. It's so well said. I'm always reminded of Joseph Campbell, and
Mhm.
psychedelics they've been an incredible part of my life. And Keith, I want to say thanks, man. Like, this has been an awesome conversation.
My pleasure,
You
John.
are an awesome guy.
Thank you. Likewise.
It takes one to know one, I
Hey,
guess. But hey, let's say people are watching right now, Keith, and they want to figure out how to reach out to you. Maybe they know someone that could use some help, or maybe they just want to chit chat with you. Where can they find you?
well, on LinkedIn, you can look me up on LinkedIn, or I do have my own personal website that's pretty small, but you can contact me there, and it's spiritualscientist.me.me. So you could look there, or just Google, and I've got my work, website or work emails, and so any of those work. Just look me up on Google.
Nice. Ladies and gentlemen, go down to the show notes. Check out Keith. That's all we got. Aloha.
Thank you.